talk about club. I'm excited. Let's kick it off with Pool W, which is the Warriors, the Lost Boy, Terminus, Seattle, and Philadelphia Freedom Quadball. So, Naresh, what do you think about Pool W?
I don't know if I'm actually here yet, but I'll jump in with Pool W. Pool W, I think, is one of the two pools of death, basically. I think we have a really interesting structure in club this year where there's like a clear 3 teams in tier 1, and then tier 2, the teams right behind them, is huge. And I think because of that, they got split between tiers 1, 2, and 3. And as a result, W got one of those pool 3 teams that's really pool 2 level performance-wise. And that's going to cause havoc because basically Warriors has to play Terminus and Lost Boys, and both of those teams are really good and really close to them. And you could have a scenario where a few things don't go your way, you don't get a catch, and suddenly Warriors got an early loss. And I think Heat and Cav are going to have the same issue too, but I think they lucked, or one of them lucked out in that they only have to play one team like that, and the other one's got to play 2. But I think, definitely not the favorable draw for the Warriors over here. And could be some really good games because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that is a storyline is Terminus hasn't really shown up to any of their tournaments with a full roster, and with potentially some of the ads they might be able to get for nationals, I think Terminus is very interesting as a team because I think you don't want to be playing Terminus as a pot 3. And so for Pool W, I think Terminus is definitely that team that will be very tough for teams. I think Lost Boys is a very interesting pot 2 team. We've been seeing what Abe Benningson has in his club rankings. And I think Lost Boys is a very interesting team. I think that's the way I'm going to put it, because I think the way they play is it's very straightforward. And from what I've seen in the film, they are very much drive and dish, find the alley-oops, find the open person, find the cutter, and get their shots, get their goals from there. But especially against these type of athletes that they might have to go up against in Warriors and Terminus, and after months of being able to study it, I think, will that type of offense be able to handle the defenses that Warriors and Terminus might be able to throw at them? Warriors and Lost Boys, that happened at CCI, and that game was actually fairly close for the most part, but I'd say that was probably one of the worst games that Warriors played in a while. They looked sloppy. They looked very just disorganized. And so for me personally, Matt, I would slightly disagree with you there. I think Warriors should still run through this pool, but I think the Warriors Terminus game will be a lot closer than the Warriors Lost Boys game. And then going into Seattle, Philadelphia, I think Freedom definitely did not get the draw they wanted. This is going to be a tough pool for them completely. And then Seattle, this was a very competitive team last year in the West, where they were able to fight for West Regional championships. And I'm not too familiar with their roster because I do know they lost a few people from last year's roster. So Seattle as a pot 4 team might be interesting. I'll be very honest, I don't know too much about them, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I would say. Oh, sorry, you go, Emily.
You're good. I think Seattle is a very good team, and I think they have a lot of the pieces that are really important. Like Drew Sartorius has been very solid for that team. I think they have like solid beaters. I think what's gonna actually like be really hard for them is their flag runner on pitch periods. The games that I've watched of them, they've been a little bit inconsistent. I think I watched the Anteaters Seattle game from West Regionals, and they were up, I think, 4 goals. It was 70-30 when the flag runner was released, and during that period, they did not score a single goal, and Anteaters caught and tied. And they ended up being able to finish the game and win it. But I think it's more important. Like, I think that's something that at a level where it's going to be so competitive, they really need to figure out. Otherwise, they will struggle in a pool like this with a lot of really talented seekers like Sam Scarfoni on the Lost Boys, Tony Bonadio on Terminus. I think Shitty is still seeking for Philly. So.
Yeah, and I think I would have to agree with you, Naresh. I think Warriors do win it pretty handily, but I think for a pot 3 team, Terminus is a rough draw because that's a physical team. There's a lot of big people on that team. There's a lot of fast people on that team. People like Quincy and Lee, like they can slow down DME enough that he can't just run up the score and then coast with the third line. It'll be a real game, and I think it'll tire them out compared to some of the other pod 3 teams that would have given them at least an easier day. But yeah, I would be surprised if Warriors drop one of those games.
Yeah, I mean, since it's a first day time slot, not first day time slot, I'm sorry, because it's a first day game. I think getting that Lost Boys Terminus matchups to really get warmed up and make sure you're not just coasting through all the games, I think is very interesting as competitively, right? Where sometimes you will, like what happened to Harvard at Northeast Regionals this past year, where they played a bunch of easy teams or teams that they were better than, and they showed up to day 2 and they were like, well, they were telling me how they just were not ready for they weren't initially ready for the immediate physicality of what they saw day 2. And so I think I think we're in agreement where Terminus as a pot 3 team is not the team that you want to pull, but it'll definitely be interesting how they come out of this, because I fully expect Warriors to look dominant most of this pool. But and again, for me, I have Terminus as my pot 2 team, as the 2 seed coming out of this pool.
I think what Nash talked about regarding like having something in your pool that's really going to challenge you, I think is something that's going to be really valuable, especially because every single bracket game is going to be really competitive. So I hope that the people in this pool feel like they're getting that. And I agree that I think Terminus Lost Boys game is going to be really exciting. I think Terminus wants to run in transition, and I think the Lost Boys also wants to do that. So it's going to be kind of a matchup to see who can do that better. And the Lost Boys zone is pretty solid, and I think Terminus has kind of struggled breaking down zones this year if you watch. So I'm just excited to see who ends up coming out of that as a 2, because let me just check the bracket really quickly.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Yeah, so I'm excited for that game as well, because that's gonna be just a run and gun game that could go up to like 300 if they just decide forget defense, we're just gonna run. And an interesting part is that looking at also though who gets third is that whoever gets third would play the winner of another pool, or I'm sorry, would pay the second place out of the Z pool, which would be an interesting discussion when we get to that too.
Yeah, I think there's value in knowing what your pool is and like where you're going to be in the bracket, but I also am intrigued to see how people's understanding of where people fall in the bracket affects things. For me, the teams that come out of this pool are going to be the Warriors, the Lost Boys, and Terminus. And I think the Lost Boy Terminus game is going to determine who's the 2 versus the 3.
Yep, I'd agree with all that. And I don't know if I'm so sure that it's going to be Terminus, but I would lean towards Terminus. Either way, I'm with you on. I definitely want to watch that game because that'd be fun. On to Pool X.
So this pool, I think, is obviously the one that my team is in. And I think it looks very interesting. It's got Heat, TCQC, Bosnia, Washington, and Mile High. I think that, like a lot of teams, I know Bosnia will be bringing people who like the most full roster at nationals. So I think that's very interesting. I'm personally very excited to play with the team that's being brought to nationals this year. But I also think, from my point of view as a player on Bosnia, these are all teams that we haven't played yet this year. So I'm really excited for a lot of those new matchups. I think TCQC Washington is going to be a very interesting game, because I think Washington has one of the best point defenders in the country in Justin Kramer. And so with a TCQC team that didn't seem to want to go into contact in the West Regional Final, I think that's something that could kind of throw a wrench in it. But yeah, that's kind of where my brain is so far. Go ahead, Matt.
I think this is similar to Pool W, where this is kind of the rougher pool, because it's got a Pool 3 team that is definitely Pool 2 quality in Bosnia, and probably at the higher end of that Pool 2 group. I think whereas Warriors versus Lost Boys and Terminus, I think Warriors have a pretty solid advantage. I don't know if that advantage is as big with Heat versus Bosnia. I also feel like the 4 and the 5 teams in this pool are stronger than some of the other pot 4 and pot 5 teams. So all in all, I think this is a pretty rough pool as well. Probably even, I would only say W is rougher because I think Warriors have been head and shoulders above, maybe not head and shoulders, but I think they've been the best team in the league so far this year. And I can see the Monuments making trouble with the 2 and the 3 seeds. I can see High maybe stealing the game from Washington. Like, there's a lot that can go wrong holding seed wise in this pool, and I think it's going to make it a very exciting pool because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally for me, this Pool X is the pool of death, mostly because Matt, you were saying it where the top 4 and 5 teams are probably much higher caliber than the other top 4 or 5 teams in the other pools. And obviously, we know what Bosnia is able to do when they have their full roster, and we know what they've been able to do historically. And so, for me, this matchup right here, the 2 and 3 seed will definitely be very interesting because as people fight for it. But I think, as Emily was saying earlier, Monuments with Justin Kramer, with the other additions that they will have for nationals, I think Monuments versus Twin Cities will be the deciding factor in for that pot 3 seed. Pot 3 seed? No, the 3 seed coming out of Pool X. So I'm very, very excited to see that. And Monuments a couple weeks ago was actually able to hold Warriors to a very, very close game for the first, I'd say, about 10-ish minutes or so. And obviously, that's not a full game, but this was also a short rostered Monuments with about 11 people going up against for the most part, Warriors were also short rostered, but it was also a very tough Warriors team, and you know what you're getting from this Warriors team. And so Monuments was able to hang in there, and I think for any team that might go in thinking that Monuments as a pot 4 team is not that great, I think they're going to be in for a rude awakening. I think Monuments is a very exciting team to watch, and personally, like I said, the Twin Cities versus Monuments game is the game that I'm circling here for who comes out of here as the 3rd seed and out of this pool.
Yeah, I think Twin Cities as a 2nd seed or being in pool 2 kind of surprises me. I think basically a testament to Twin Cities kind of just handling their business with all the teams that they should have beat, and they beat them all, and they only lost 3 times, and they lost to good teams, Lost Boys Terminus and DCQC, but like their only wins for like their best win is against Boom Train, and then after that it's Bay Area Breakers in Pool 3, and they didn't beat anybody else in Pool 2 or 1. So it's very interesting how like they've got that Pool 2, they're in the Pool 2, but they haven't beat that many other Pool 2 or Pool 3 teams. So it'd be very interesting to see. So I agree with that Washington. I think Bosnia, them versus Bosnia, won't be as close as them versus Washington.
I also think at least one thing I hope to see out of TCQC is I think at West, Emma Persons wasn't playing, and you could kind of see that in how the offense was running. And I think she really is like the field general when she's playing. So I hope she is back on the field at nationals. Yeah, and I think Mile High is also a very solid team. I have not actually watched film yet of them. I'm working on it. But I know when we played them last year, they had a lot of really good ideas. Their chasers maybe and beaters just like weren't meshing and executing together.
Yeah, I think that does it for me for Pool X. You guys have anything else you want to add about Pool X, or should we move on to Pool Y?
I mean, I think just a quick little thing from Pool X. I think
Sure.
Twin Cities will definitely have a seeker advantage in Pool X amongst all of the teams that are competing in this. Obviously, we know what Heat has been able to do with the seeker game. They have a bunch of phenomenal seekers, but I think HPB playing for Twin Cities this year is really going to show why he made Team USA last year, was one of the best seekers in the entire country last year, and we're going to continue seeing that from Twin Cities. And so if it comes down to a flag runner range game, I think that's something Twin Cities might prefer, because having that immediate 35-point cushion will definitely be interesting, whether that's letting them get back into a game or moving that game away from range.
I say I would definitely give you that HPB is one of the best seekers out there right now. But do you think his beaters are going to give him enough looks against teams like Monuments and Bosnia?
I mean, that's a great point. You're not wrong. But again, HPB needs a couple seconds, and I was one of the recipients of a 10-second HPB catch. So you're not wrong, but it'll be interesting because I think Cody Narveson will be able to handle their core and coach their core to give. And again, this team's been playing together with Minneapolis and MLQ. This team has been playing together for a while. So if they can get HPB a couple seconds, that's all they'll need. But again, that's not to take anything away from Kit Palpour. We know what Kit's been able to do. Kit from Bosnia, Palpour's on Bosnia, and this Bosnia team, if they can throw out Kit while letting Tyler Trudeau stay in the quaffle game, that's huge for this team, because then that you don't need to take Tyler out of the quad ball game and Kit can just go out there and do marathon shifts. We saw Kit do that with BU. We saw Kit do that with Rochester. We've been seeing Kit and how dynamic Kit is as a defensive seeker if needed, but also as an offensive threat in terms of an off-ball chaser, but also just in terms of sheer ability to catch a flag runner. And so, yeah, I mean, personally, I think Twin Cities and Bosnia definitely have a seeker advantage in this pool. That's, again, not to take anything away from what he has been able to do, because I know if they want to throw in Daniel Williams or pretty much anyone they want to throw out there, because I think they have 3 or 4 different seeker looks that they can throw out there. This pool X, I think, will be very interesting in that regard.
I think it's definitely going to be a exciting and adventurous seeking pool, because there's a lot of different people you could see out there. Again, I will never say anything bad about Henry Bear Benson, but I do love me some Kit Palpour. So yeah, let's go ahead and discuss Pool Y, which is Cavalry, Boston Pandas, Slice, Vipers, and Chicago, in case anyone forgot. I, for one, am very excited that we're getting a rematch of Cav Pandas, which happened last year. Wasn't on the stream pitch, so we can't go back and watch it. But I think if you were there in that game, you kind of got to see Ian Skura put a lot of people on skates in the first few minutes of that game, which was really fun to watch. I do think the addition of Josh Johnson to the Cav team makes that highly unlikely, but the idea of just getting to watch those two players play against each other is always like a must-watch experience. They're probably two of the most dynamic quadball players in the country at this point. And I, for one, if I'm not playing and or reffing, will be trying to be there.
Yeah, Cav and the Pandas this year are both a massive mixed bag for me. Pandas, I think it's because like that team has a lot of players from past championships, both in MLQ and USQ, and I think they play seriously, but then all of a sudden like you get to nationals and like that championship vibe kicks in and they just turn it up to another gear. And then Cav this year struggled at the start of the year, but I mean, measuring Cav is in the fall is like looking at like the 45-day forecast. Like it's just useless. Like they don't. It's like the preseason for them is the entirety of the fall and half of the spring. They're a completely different team at nationals every year. So I would not be surprised if Cav shows up to nationals. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they went like 3-3, or if they went like 8-0. Like that's just Cav at nationals. So that Cav versus Panda game, I have no clue what to expect except a really fun game to watch. And then looking down at some of the other teams, this where I think might be the best 4 versus 5 team matchup in the Vipers and Chicago United. I think Chicago United, like they went 6-9 this year, but they played some really good teams. And I think if they kind of like stack their lines and play some of like the indie core that's got more experience together and the really good beaters that they have, I think they can take the Vipers. I think that would be a fun game to watch. Slice, I'm curious. I don't know. I could see Slice playing 1 and 2 close. I could also see them playing 4 and 5 close, but I think they're like the perfect pool 3 team that would be able to hold seed here and sneak into day 2 as the 3rd place team. What do you think, Naresh?
Yeah, I mean, I think Slice this year has been very interesting because they've had a lot of roster turnover. They've had different people come on board, different people leave. The last time we saw Slice play was at the Terminus tournament on March 4th, where they were competing against Terminus fairly well in the first game of the day. It was a close game. It was one that they were able to match up well against. But as the day progressed, as they kept playing games, it quickly became that the depth really kicked in, where Boom Train and again, this was March 4th tournament, Boom Train and Terminus were able to just run through Slice a few times. But even just at HVI, you saw Slice show up and actively take it to Pandas, where they were, I think, 2 goals to win. Pandas needed 1 goal to win, and Pandas got the extra goal to win the game. But Slice has shown this year that they've been able to compete against higher level teams. And I think what you said is exactly right. I think they're the perfect pot 3 team where they're going to compete against these higher level teams. But again, it might be to the 10, 15-ish minute mark. And then as the depth kicks in, because you can't keep playing the 1 or 2 lines the entire time. You're going to have to get some different people reps. And I think that's where the issue will be for Slice. And specifically in the beater game, I just don't know if they'll be able to handle Cav or Panda's beaters. And that's not to take anything away from Chicago as well, where I know Danny Yakub is one of the beaters on Chicago United. And He's been huge for that program's success. He's been huge for everything they've been able to do, and specifically staying on Chicago to help coach and mentor that team. Because Danny Yakub is a MLQ caliber beater. He's been playing on MLQ for a while, and so Slice, I think, is in that perfect range, as Matt was saying. I think if they come out here and potentially, because let me slow down, because my issue with all of this is we know that Panda's beaters are going to be fantastic. We know they're going to be able to create turnovers. We know everything that Panda's beaters will give us, but sometimes it really turns into the Ian Skura show for Pandas. And if Ian is not on, they have trouble scoring, and that's going to be a storyline this year, because all of this year, I think, because some of these games they've looked really good. Other games their offense has not clicked, or Ian's missed a couple shots, and sometimes the team becomes very shot heavy. And so when you watch them play, I think you don't. It's a mixed bag about what they might give you per game. So I think if Panda's Slice ends up being a very close game, I would not be surprised. And so it'll be interesting. I think the way it is right now, I think Pandas just fundamentally has the deeper beater core, and so I think they'll stay in that 2 seed in this pool. But I think Slice, if they have a good day, if everyone's kicking it, everyone's feeling good, I think Slice can really take it to them, because Slice's quadball players are really good, right? Like Frank Minson's very solid, MJ's very solid, MJ Johnson's very solid, Vinny Iannucci has been excellent, Bruna Silvestri, Molly Potter. They have all the makings, all the tools to really upset teams higher than them. So I'm very excited if they can pull it together and come out and pop off in the at nationals.
And I also think being close with Slice is a very dangerous place to be, because they have 2 of the best seekers in the country on their team, both Kellen Cupid and Vinny Iannucci, who both offer very different looks at what the kind of flag runners might see. So I think in a Panda Slice game, if it's close, maybe some of the Panda shots haven't gone, and Slice a quick catch, it is an opportunity for an upset. I do think Cav will likely come out of this pool as the 1 seed. I think, as Melton mentioned, like everything for Cav builds to nationals, and I don't think we've seen whatever trick they have up their sleeve yet. I think Panda's beaters will probably outplay the Cav beaters, but I think the inconsistencies within like Panda's offense that Naresh mentioned are things that the Cav chaser defense, which is so disciplined and like on top of it, is going to be able to exploit very easily.
Yeah, I'm glad you said Kellen was one of the best seekers right now, because I feel a lot better when he caught me in about 30 seconds at the Terminus tournament. So yeah, I would agree. He's a very, very good seeker. I think the biggest thing you brought up with Slice, Naresh, is that the players that they lost throughout the year, because I think later on during the spring, they lost both Christian Barnes and Chris Forstrom to Warriors, and I don't know if they really recovered from that, because it was so quickly before the Terminus tournament. I'm curious to see if they fill those holes a little better coming into nationals, now that they've had more time to kind of like change up their strategy and move people around to kind of fill the void from those 2. But yeah, hopping back on the Vipers versus Chicago United game. Yeah, how do I feel about that? Because like I agree with what you said about like the beaters, and not just Danny, also like Ken Bonomo and Harold Advincula, and trying to think, like they've had a lot of good beaters that played a lot of time in Indy and made me look stupid at a lot of practices. So I would agree that they got a really good beating core there. I'd be curious to see if their chasers can step up, though. I feel like that's always been their problem, is they'd have blood pressure control for long periods of time and just not able to score off of it, which is funny because like they got size. They've got people that like Kevin Farley used to play linebacker in high school, and I know because the way he hit me at a practice one day, like you don't tackle that hard without having played football. So I'm curious to see if like that team can really put it together and take it to the Vipers. Like, what do you think their chances are against the Vipers?
So I think it's going to be a very interesting match. I do think the Vipers have a very strong beating core led by Michael Shinevi, who formerly played for Harvard and was known as Soup. They typically run either Soup with Sam Fishgren, who's one of the founders of the team. And I think they do a really good job in using the control that they have. I will say that I think in the film that I watched of them, there was a lack of like cohesion between when the beaters and chasers were attacking. I also think John Birdstrap was doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the Vipers. And so I think if you have a player who can force the ball out of his hands and make sure like he's not the one driving and dunking on you, what Chicago has. Honestly, I think it's one of, as we've all talked about, one of the more exciting 4 or 5 games.
Oh, also one more quick shout. Catherine, I forgot, another beater on Chicago United, is extremely good as well. Forgot her last name, but very good as well.
Yeah,
so full disclosure, I'm on Boom Train. Go on.
Yeah, so with that, we'll get to our last pool. Thanks for sticking with us for this whole hour and a half so far. This has Boom Train, DCQC, the Bay Area Breakers, Orlando Spider Knights, and Southwest Alliance. Again, I think this is a game that I personally have been waiting for all season, which is Boom Train versus DCQC.
Yes.
I think both of these teams are kind of teams you've seen grow from over the last few years and just get progressively better and better. And I think that you haven't seen either team at full strength. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how their, like, all facets of their game kind of work together. I think the Boom Train beaters are so good at knowing like what their chasers want them to do and creating the space for that. Like you'll see a beater call for a beat out on a hoop defender and then the chaser will score immediately. So I think they're one of the teams that you have to game plan against the most. I do think that DCQC, with Ben Mertens as a coach, will be doing all of the scouting and research and have all the trick, like for everything that Boom Train does, they're going to try and figure out a way. And now that they have the time to like scout and figure it out, I know that they were supposed to play at South Regionals, so a lot of the scouting is already done. So I'm excited to see. It's going to be like a chess match is what I think, where each team tries something and then it's going to work, and then other team's going to adjust, and it's just going to continue happening. So
just one of those games where you see like 6 different defenses throughout the game because there's constantly switching. So I don't know how. So Boom Train played 28 games as a club team this year, which I think is the most out of any club team, racking up the frequent flyer miles. We played every single team in the top 3 pools except for DCQC, despite being at least 2 tournaments, because I think they were at South and we were at CCI together. But yeah, we somehow have not played against them yet, so I am really looking forward to that game. I will go much more into strategy because you covered it all so well, and because I'm on Boom Train. But yeah, looking forward to that chess match and what could become of it. What do you got, Naresh, about that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think Boom Train is one of the teams that I really enjoy watching because as Emily was saying, their cohesion between the beaters and the chasers is extremely fun. Where if I think I was watching film a couple weeks ago from that Terminus tournament where it was Boom Train versus Slice, and it was back-to-back plays. They did the exact same thing where the ball would go to the right, take space, kick it to the back. As soon as that pass happens to the back, you see a beater on the left side beating someone out in the small hoop. And as soon as that ball gets to the back, they're just hitting the lane and passing to the small hoop player who's always open. And so watching that level of cohesion is so much fun. And for me, Boom Train is definitely a team that has looked very solid this year. DCQC, I think, is a team that surprised a lot of people, similar to what Emily was saying earlier about how much they've grown in the last couple of years. I think DCQC this year really surprised a lot of people at Oktoberfest, where they were able to hang with Warriors during quadball points, but they weren't able to pull the flag runner, which is really what ended up being the difference in the game. And every single tournament after that, every single game after that, they've really been doing their best to be competitive, and that showed at the Mid-Atlantic Regionals, where they pretty much ran through every team they've played, and they won the Mid-Atlantic Regional Championship. For me, I think this is something that a lot of people have said for the last about a year or so since this person was really got national attention, and that's TJ Jenrette. I think TJ is an absolute star. We were talking about Pool Y, where it's going to be JJ versus Ian Skura. Pool Z is going to be the TJ Jenrette show for DCQC. This dude is a one-man show at points, and he's going to be a show, he'll high step, but he'll play the game hard, he'll have fun with it. And I think personally in this Pool Z, I think DCQC, and I apologize to you, Gramps, but I think DCQC has the advantage here seeker wise. I think DCQC is a really smart team, and if Bernie and Trina are on, that team is extremely difficult to play against. And now you still have Robbie May potentially practicing with them, coaching them, playing for them potentially, I think. But you have the beater Rice, who really popped off in the Warriors game a couple weeks ago. But I think TJ coming in as a seeker in that 30 minutes, if they can, not 30 minutes, I'm sorry, 20 minutes, if they can give TJ time, he is a bona fide star in the flag runner game. And personally, I have DCQC with the seeker advantage, which in a close enough game, I do think that'll obviously matter. So I'm not saying Boom Trainer DC. I'm not going to give a winner here. I just think this game is one that I've also been very excited for. And so personally, I think because the seeker game goes to DCQC, I think this game is going to be extremely, extremely interesting.
Yeah, I will hop in there really quick and say that Boom Train has 8 losses this year, and in all 8 of them, the opposing team caught the snitch. Or the flag runner, excuse me. So that is a very good point about the snitching or the flag running. Sorry. What'd you have, Emily?
Yeah, so I think we've obviously both all waxed poetic about this game, which for those of you who are listening, you can catch on 4:10 p.m. on Field 2. I think the bottom 3 pool teams in this pool are the ones that are the most competitive, and I think the last spot to qualify for the bracket is going to be the most competitive out of Pool C, because I think Bay Area, Orlando Spider Knights, and SWA are all very talented teams, but they all have different things that you can kind of exploit. So if you do your research and you study and you figure out like where the weak points are, that a lot of things can happen. I think with like Orlando, I keep thinking Oklahoma, but Orlando Spider Knights, I think if you're playing them, you cannot let them get near the flag runner. Elijah, I forget their last name, but Elijah will catch in like no time at all. I think at South they caught twice in like the first run up, which was honestly very embarrassing for Frank, but that's okay. And so I think that's something where like if you know that going into it, you can plan for that and you can be like, we're going to sell out on this. For Bay Area Breakers, they also have a really talented set of beaters: Duran Allison, Hugo Kirzo, Jenny Yu, and I think Sam Harris is one of the most underrated players in the country currently. Watching him play the Boom Train game Breakers game at HVI, he was the driving force behind, I think, the majority of the goals that Breakers got against Boom Train, and they were having a really hard time tackling him. So I'm excited to see if that happens again. And then SWA, I think, is a team that does a lot of preparation, does a lot of practice, and has a lot of really good pieces. John from Penn State, whose last name I'm forgetting, but also plays for League Legend, is another one of those really heavy drivers who, if they get in a lane and shooting, they're very hard to bring down and will get a lot of goals. So I think the fight for third is going to be very, very competitive for this. And I think you could have a situation where you have teams split, which like Bay Area, Orlando Spider Knights, and SWA 1v1v1, where it might have to come down to tiebreakers, which would be very stressful.
Yeah, totally agree. Like, I feel like there's a pretty solid line between like the pot 2 and the pot 3 teams in this pool, but I think this is the third seed that has opened up. This is the pool that has the biggest chance of a third seed not making it to day 2 because of the teams beneath them. Bay Area Breakers they got a really good record, and they got all the way to a pot 3 seed or pot 3 team by kind of just tearing apart the West. They got one loss to the Anteaters inside the West, but outside the West they haven't been doing so hot. They've got losses to Slice and Black Pandas and the Boom Train, as you mentioned. I'm curious if Southwest size and Spider Knight size, if that's going to be a problem for them. I think the West plays a more beater heavy, maybe like a more beater heavy, shot heavy kind of game, not so physical. And I'm curious if Southwest is going to be able to bring that physicality to the game and kind of overwhelm the Bay Area Breakers with it. So I'm with you. I think all three of those games between those three teams are really up in the air, and I think all three of them are great to watch because I could see any team coming out of into that third spot by winning those games.
Yeah, I personally have Southwest Alliance taking that 3 seed. I think for me, I think Bay Area Breakers, from what I've seen, they're really reliant on a few players to really dictate how their game goes. And I think scoring wise, will they be able to score enough against other teams to really catapult them into that 3rd seed? For me, I think that's hard to. I personally, I think that's hard to ask, or from what I've seen, it's hard to ask of this team to do. I think Sam Selly is a very, very solid beater, but Sam Selly's potentially in that Southwest Alliance game will match up against Southwest beaters that have seen him play a couple years ago, have played against him, played with him potentially. Not too familiar with the whole Southwest Alliance. I'm sorry, the Southwest rosters in general in regards to what beaters are coming from where. But I know with Southwest Alliance, I think personally their physicality, and I think this is where, as a Pop 5 team, it's really unfortunate because their only opponents were two Pot 1 teams and a Pegasus team that was a semifinalist from last year, right? So they're playing really tough competition. So I think this is a very underranked Southwest team as a Pop 5 team. And personally, I think the Spider Knights versus Southwest Alliance game is going to be very, very interesting because I think Spider Knights is one of those teams that really doesn't get talked about, but they're sneaky athletic. They have a lot of the pieces. They've been playing together for a bit. They have size, they have athleticism, and it should be a good time. And I think Spider Knights versus Southwest will be the deciding factor for who ends up getting that Pot 3 or seed 3, 3rd seed in that pool.
Nice. Oh, also regarding a previous discussion, bringing it back, it's very unfortunate between the Boom Trade and the DCQC game that whoever gets the 2nd seed out of those two teams has to play the 3rd place team coming out of the first bracket, which would be, assuming Warriors wins, Terminus or Lost Boys, which is a really rough way to start day 2. And that's the interesting way with the way the pods fall, with the 2 seeds having to play a 3 seed that's really not pool 3 quality, you know?
Yeah, I think no matter what, I know we've kind of covered all this, but the bracket is going to be spicy. There's some fun things that could happen. You could have all 4 of the pool, like the Pot 1 teams on the same side of the bracket. So it's going to be a spicy. I hope everyone should bring their favorite hot sauce and then.
Yeah, no, actually, I think we should talk about the bracket for a second because, the way, as you mentioned, it lines up. So some interesting things to discuss, like what we just mentioned with having to play like a really good, being a 2nd place, like getting 2nd place in your pool and having to play another team that's basically 2nd place level in your pool day 2. But also the way it lined up, as long as Cav and Heat win their pools, they will not rematch in the finals. They would rematch in the semis as Pots, Pool, and X and Y. Yeah, so we will not see a repeat of last year's games if both of them hold seed and win their pools. And then it's assuming all 1st place teams do that, it would be the semifinals on the other side would be Boom Train and Warriors day 2. What other spicy things do you want to point out from the bracket here?
I haven't looked at it enough to know where people are falling, so I can't give you that information.
Yeah, I'm curious where the other pot of death where that team would fall out of. So that'd be, I believe, Pot X? No, I'm sorry, Pot Y. Pot Y's 3rd place team. So yeah, W. Oh, wow. So that's okay. So yeah, so 2nd or 3rd out of 3rd place out of Pot W, or sorry, 2nd place in the Warriors pot would have to play 3rd place in Pot Y. So that would be another rough game too. Yeah, it seems like getting that 1st place is going to be really key for the day 1 teams because you don't want to be stuck with these extra games on day 2 just because of like with how tight that 2nd tier of teams is. Being able to skip that game is kind of crucial.
Yeah, I mean, going off of that, talking about just like extra games, talking about games being played and stuff, there is a potential chance that we might get a Warriors Bosnia game in the quarterfinals. And if that's the game Warriors is pulling for their quarters, that is a very, very tough matchup, I think, to pull, because there's history between these two teams at nationals specifically. The first nationals they played against each other. That was probably one of the longest games in USQ history, with how long that game went on for. The second time that happened, Warriors ended up coming back, beating them at nationals, and now if they can potentially see each other again in the quarters, I don't know that that is the team that Warriors might want to pull so early on in the quarters. But after that, if everything else breaks the way it should, then yeah, I mean, we might potentially get, as Matt was saying, we might get a Warriors Boom Train in the semifinals and Heat Cav in the semifinals, which potentially sets up. I think it was Tad Walter's hot take from a couple years ago. Not a couple years ago, I'm sorry, a couple weeks ago, where Tad was saying how the Northeast might get a regional champion, national championship champion this year. And I think Warriors is in a prime spot to do that. I think this is a deep team. This is a team that's been competing at a very high level for a long time. And I think this year they've really pulled out all the stops to establish themselves as the team to beat. And they finally gotten their wins over Cav and then Heat in the same tournament has been really impressive. So I'm very excited to see nationals this year. And I think similar to college wise, I think with the way the bracket is set up, I think the tournament for the club side is wide open, and I'm very excited to see what comes of it for day 2.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how Warriors pans out. I think like the biggest problem they had in the past was their offense. I feel like they just didn't score that much, and then they picked up DME, and suddenly they score a lot more often. I think that has been pretty huge for them. I'm curious though, like everything's different at nationals. Now you're playing, 7 or 8 games over 2 days. So I'm curious to see if their depth can hold up for them. But outside of that, I feel like they're kind of the favorites right now. I think they haven't lost to any of the tier 2 teams. They've only lost once to Cav and once to Heat. I kind of feel like they're the team to beat. But again, everybody in Texas knows Texas just becomes a different monster at nationals. So it's whatever happens, it's going to be exciting to watch.
Yeah. So I think all around everything we've talked about so far, which again, if you're here after hour and 15 or 45 minutes, very, very proud of you, is that it's going to be one of like the most exciting nationals that have happened in the last, I don't know, 10 years, 9 years, however long I've been here. And I think it's something where if you want to be able to relive it, we're going to need help to film it. So reach out to anyone on this call and let us know if you're available to help us try and stream games. There are 12 games happening any given day. And yeah, also make sure to be purchasing your ticket if you haven't, and prepping your body and taking care of yourself, because the most important thing playing is that we all have a good time and that we get to play a sport we love with the people we love.
Absolutely. Drink your water, kids.